joining us at the back, please come right to the front. We're waiting for you. Don't hesitate. Come right to the front. We have an amazing session coming up, and we don't want you to miss it, and we also don't want you to be that person waiting, excuse me, right, in the front of the camera. All right. So quick bit of housekeeping. We would like to know what your thoughts have been. I know a lot of you have been contributing to the slido.com platform. I want to request that we put, the active poll, it's already on. Let me get off the stage then, so you can see it. So this is what we'd like to invite you to respond to. If you can scan the QR code and join this particular poll, we'd like to run it now with your permission.
You can scan using your phones. Because people are just looking at the screen expecting magic. Let's scan if you have your phone on. Some of us, I know, our phones might be off because of the contributions we had back at the workshops. So you can scan it and then emojify your feelings. From sharenting, we have a free ethics. We came up with terms. The session considered the current generation of children who are digital natives, yet born in the era where online strategy is still a critical concern. The potential of social media to expose talent, parental consent as a key determinant to what can be shared, posted online, as well as legal implications. I wish I was in that workshop the whole time, because I think this is quite, for the parents who have kids now, you don't know how much is too much, how much screen time is too much, again you don't know what they are seeing, and I think that's, then there's Afri ethics.
Afri ethics. What does it mean for media ethics and standards to be African? So this was actually very thought-provoking. I managed to catch some of that because I was in this Cairo space, and its impact on African media. It covered the need for African-centric ethical standards in media practice, designed by African philosophies, cultural thought, and tradition. The facilitators and the participants had really great engagement on the need to decolonize media ethics in Africa, question the relevance of Western standards, as well as create strategies to amplify African voices authentically. And some of the key challenges that were raised were how to develop ethics. This discussed creating a shared understanding of ethics in a continent that is so diverse. I think one of the interventions was about how even in Kenya we can't agree on the national outfit or the national dress. How on earth are we going to do this? Governments, issues, language barriers, and of course the dominance of what is considered Western education in journalism schools. And of course it ended on an action-oriented note where the participants assented to the path of Afri-ethics, relying on media and journalists to reframe their storytelling narratives so that they could showcase African resilience and vibrancy, countering the negative stereotypes and disrupting power dynamics. Very, very interesting. Next.
Yes, and next, some people went fishing and they had a podcast. How to make a living as a podcaster. Of course, there's a great question of target market, the ratings when they go low, inclusivity in terms of disability. In the morning we had the Sense Hub, and they took us through that. Where do I draw the line of being on all social media platforms for your own security? How do I build the podcast brand and not me? Knowing your market value or knowing what rates, and if they are at all good rates. What tool apps can be expensive for different podcasts, as we were stating in terms of niches. What are some of the productivity hacks that can set me up for sustainability? And I think that is quite deep for all the podcasters and the would-be podcasters
who are about to make some cash. I like it. So can we talk about creators and mental health? Great and important topic throughout the year, I think. Well-being in body and mind for journalists and creators. Now the discussion centered around raising awareness about mental health issues and how to support those struggling. Participants shared some of their personal experience and also shared, or rather emphasized the importance of self-care practices such as journaling, meditation, healthy lifestyle, exercise, balanced nutrition, and the like. Also the value of seeking social support, professional help when you need it, and avoiding harmful habits like substance abuse. Overall, the conversation was around proactive measures in addressing mental health challenges and creating a supportive environment where individuals can feel empowered so that they prioritize their mental well-being. The key takeaway was the importance of prioritizing mental health and well-being through proactive measures. I think we can continue reading it as we scroll up. Shadow wars.
How digital mercenaries are systematically undermining African democracies and feeding public polarization. Code of Africa works on monitoring. Code for Africa works on monitoring elections in Kenya, Zambia, Nigeria, South Africa reveals pervasive manipulation of in the digital ecosystem. We're talking about information manipulation and the shadow wars. That's what they were calling it. Platform convenings. The approach: do not criminalize platforms, but encourage investment in local context understanding. There is also the rationale. Platforms should support local inventions, combat biases and nuances, recognizing the positive discussions occurring within them. That is, you think of training, mentorship, and grants. Approach: the shift from one-hit trainings to foster a culture of mentorship. So from here, there is a follow-up, a culture of mentorship. The rationale: build seasoned and experienced journalists through ongoing training and mentorship, recognizing that expertise evolves over time. Leverage fact-checking alliances. That's amazing. Then the approach: collaborate with fact-checking alliances and networks. That's very important because of true and false fake news. Rationale: tap into wider African-specific expertise to combat misinformation effectively, fostering a united front against information disorder. The takeaway, right? There is a need for multifaceted approaches, emphasizing on the importance of local context, continuous journalist development, and collaborative fact-checking networks. I think for me, there, my take out from your takeout is continuous development and also the collaborating aspect of it.
Empowering young voices was another discussion. Mtoto News, the journey in child-led storytelling. This one, I think, was the one that went on probably the longest. Mtoto News, journey amplifying children's stories, a crash course for journalists on telling stories of, by, and with children, and the perspectives of Mtoto News parents and children's perspective. The sessions delved into how Mtoto News has pioneered methods of training, mentoring, and providing platforms for children to share their unique narratives, whether it's about amplifying their voices, imparting journalistic skills, or a combination of both. They are showcasing tangible case studies and best practices to highlight the distinct approach that they have applied.
Amazing. Also, what every African journalist needs to know about gender and authoritarianism on the continent. I think they figured three main pivotal points: the socio-cultural factors. They examined the influence of cultural norms, societal expectations on women health practices and outcomes. Talk of FGM and what have you. They also touched on economic disparities, how economic inequalities contribute to the differential access to healthcare services and family planning resources, haves and have-nots. Political dynamics, analyzing the role of political structures and policies in shaping women's health initiatives and addressing reproductive rights.
All right. Demystifying crowdsourced data. I think this is a very important one. It happens more often than not. And how to work with communities to collect data that sparks change and doesn't cause too many problems. Unlocking the power of crowdsourced data, a journey of hope and possibilities. The session kicked off with a reminder to look beyond the obvious and to seek out the gaps in our understanding of the world. Is there a problem crying out for attention, yet lacking the evidence to spur action? And with a nod to the marginalized voices that are often lost in the noise, they urge the participants to consider whose stories still remain untold. But it wasn't all about identifying problems, it was also about finding solutions. Thank you, Jesus. The speakers introduced the concept of the brick wall, the barrier which is created by data gaps, and this then hinders progress. And they challenged their participants to confront the reality of unavailable data and explore how technology could break down this barrier. All right, I'm going to skip down to what the spotlight then shifted to: tools of trade, what to use rather to be able to fix this, There was a focus on Kobo Toolbox and its versatile capabilities for seamless data collection to accurate geospatial data, and the possibilities were endless. Finally, the session concluded with a reminder of the importance of data verification. Keep your findings robust.
Wow, that's a whole news item on a newspaper I'm seeing for tomorrow. That's well done. I didn't catch which workshop, but it's okay, let's scroll up. Yes, media capture is media under siege. How foreign state agencies and commercial lobbies are systematically subverting Africa's media. Mis or disinformation is an organized crime problem based off a year-long investigation on how candid echo chambers, foreign state agencies and lobbies are weaponizing the media to plant compromised positions and propaganda into African state media. The discussion delved into examples of Trojan gift horses in the name of partnerships and compromised newsrooms through training and free resources. I remember I was here when they were saying you're given a plane ticket and off you get a ticket and off you go. You don't question anything. When you come back, you can't say anything bad about those people. So the recommendation they gave, they insisted on editorial policies, ethical oversight, training and skills development. And this is what we had in the other workshop about continuous development. Yeah. Also, they checked into safeguarding the independence through various ways that they discussed. The key takeaway, these recommendations are not revolutionary. We have editorial procedures and policies in our newsrooms, but there is a gap, e.g. wired copy, right?
So ours is really just to thank you for participating and helping these key takeaways to get documented. And hopefully now you'll take them to heart and actually implement when you go back home.
I think we take a moment and remember them and do a 1 minute video.
I reached out to my soul and had, he said, isn't this how freedom feels? Isn't this how freedom feels?
Friendship is not weighed by the number of days we have known each other. And now a cloud of tears covers me. Pain comes in waves, words cease to come out of me. Some cause joy when they leave. I've grown weary of laughing. I find myself crying. This joy hurts.
When a man cries, the wind do not stop, neither does it rain. Women do not cry, neither do children cower on his robe. The world does not end, neither does the earth stop orbiting. Time does not wait for him to explain himself. When a man cries, no one knows.
Bilan Media is the Somali first women media in Somalia, putting charge in women in media is changing the agenda for Somali local media, and actually that's what Bilan is doing. As the Bilan Media team, we do all from the start, from the finishing line. We do the filming, also we do the editing and publishing, which actually is very rare to Somalia. The stories that we say women care about and usually mean ignore, like this story which is heartbreaking, mothers voicing their kids to in the IDP camp to get something that they can survive and to get their life. Also, we are the voice for the powerless, from the HIV/AIDS to albinism. We usually cover the reports of people ignored by the local community and also by the local media. Also, we are breaking down the taboos, the kind of stories that no one else wants to talk about, even mothers to their daughters. This story was, we were doing at that time, period and young girls in school, which is kind of more taboo topic to talk about in Somalia. And as a young girls, they need to know when they grow up what's going to happen. They have the right to get that information. As a Somalia, we are telling Somalia telling its own story, because when local reporters are covering these stories, they do in a deeper way, in the understanding a way, because we are from the community and the community is from us. So covering and telling those stories based on what's happening in Somalia within the community is very important, and also preaching outside Somalia because of in Somalia. This is the kind of stories that we covered for the international media. I would say there's less need now for the foreign reporters to come and report in Somalia. They can still come and report, but still we are including the voice of Somali community so that they can reach in their perspective away in the global. This is the same. We usually cover for international media in different way, that when foreign people come to Somalia and cover those stories, it will have different sense. So covering by the local journalists, it will make more sense because we are from the community. Also, we cover both stories from stories of hope, like new business, women being role model, and also local culture, and also our local artists. The stories or the reporters should not be the story, but as a pillar in media, we are changing how Somali women are viewed in Somalia and outside Somalia, so that by giving them opportunity, like working in a media and also the other work, in showing in a way, not saying like women can do, but in actual way that they can do, and it's existing now. So it's role model for the young girls.
These agreements then unpack how, alongside the content, which includes injecting the media through content sharing, that there should also be joint content production to ensure that there's local, authentic voices in the content itself, that there should be an explicit policy to then ensure that this content is also digitally packaged so it can go beyond traditional media. And thirdly, that journalism exchanges, particularly between journalists associations and editor guilds, should be expanded dramatically as a way to promote the spread of the content. As media, we need to encourage exchanges, especially outside of North America and Europe, which are already overrepresented in kind of the traditional media sources that come to our newsrooms. So these exchanges are healthy. What we need to ensure for all exchanges, whether it's to Germany, whether it's to Brazil, these are places that I've been on media exchanges, whether it's to India or any other country, is that there is a clear understanding of the terms of engagement and of the expectations of what is the intention of the exchange, whether it's training or whether it's a study tour or whether it's a reporting grant.
I'm on the Bloomberg team, but I have the honor of just being able to be connected with these amazing people. How amazing has Christine's past 2 days been? She told me not to project you, but still, I mean, we have to give everybody her flowers, and this has been an amazing second year of the Media Festival, and I'm sure tomorrow it'll be good to be at the spa for a whole week after this. But at Bloomberg, we have the honor and pleasure of working with some amazing journalists and trendsetters across the continent. It was nice to pop into the session on community media to see some of the very first community media grantees that we supported in Nigeria. The media fellows that we work with, also we've worked with, collaborated with NDIF in the past. So on the stage, I'm not going to repeat the summary that June gave, but really it's kind of being an anti-panel panel. And just give you an opportunity to hear some of the insights. We know that the media globally, but especially on the continent, continues to innovate. There's been a lot of changes, as we've heard through all the presentations in the last 2 days. And so really this is an opportunity to discuss with the media fellows, and I believe Mapi and Patiswa can talk about how, about that journey, what you've done, in terms of transformational leadership and changes. There was a reference to SABC earlier today, and it's another election year in many countries, so you might talk about that. But I'll start with Christine, and just so she can be off the hook and relax a little bit. But Has this festival met your expectations?
Has this festival met my expectations? I will answer that question in a minute. But just to explain why we are on stage, Agil is with Bloomberg, but we all met as part of a Bloomberg fellowship, one of the many, many fellowships of many cohorts that Bloomberg has hosted on the continent. And so we're here as part of Bloomberg's 10 years of celebrating, supporting African journalists on the continent. So I think since our fellowship, which was many years ago, a lot has happened. And for me, one of the biggest things that has happened is this festival. So to answer your question, has it met my expectations? It absolutely has. For those parents who have children in our Kenya national system, you will relate with this. It has met and exceeded expectations.
Great, that's a good answer. Mapi, you're looking at me, so I'm going to go to you next because, as Christine said, this has been, at least since I've known you, you all have known each other for longer, but a 10-year journey that's taken us to Sharm el-Sheikh and Washington and many African cities and New York. And so, in that spirit, how has collaborating with other African journalists, there are many global fellowship programs that are esteemed and distinguished, but how has your fellowship journey, especially with working with your fellow Africans across different countries, shaped how you approach your work now in the media?
Thanks, Akhil. So just to give you a brief of how our fellowship worked, we were a group of editors from a number of African countries, which was Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And when you come from your country and you know your country, there's a certain perspective of the world. And when you meet this brilliant mind from the rest of the continent, you start to question what you don't know, and you learn what you don't know. But moreover, you get exposed to these cohorts of journalists that somehow in your journey, they became your partners. I was in the process of doing my MBA, and I decided that I was going to do a research on the sustainability of legacy news media organization on the continent. And in order for me to get access to media owners around the country, because I did 4 countries as well, it was the fellows that actually gave me access to media owners in Ghana, media owners in Nigeria, media owners in Kenya, as I went on and did my research. But at the time where we were in this group, and in other countries of the continent, they were already going through some of the challenges that the media is facing today. I didn't know that I was going to come back and start retrenching staff because suddenly there were no resources. And if anyone has gone through a retrenchment process, you know that you have no friends. You cannot talk to your colleagues because no one is safe and the stakes are high. And I had this community where I can say, this is what is happening, how can I best approach this? And they had walked that journey before, so it had become a huge support just for my career growth. But beside it is the learnings that we've had. I mean, today we're here and we're just reminded of some of what other countries are doing better that we can actually learn from and do more of from our countries or do less of. So you're always constantly exposed to the changing environment in our sector, but you get ideas of how to navigate your own changes that are happening in your different spaces.
Thank you, Mapi. Deji, since you're on the opposite end, I'm going to come to you, kind of tying into what Mapi was saying in terms of, innovating. The media landscape has changed. There's been a lot of retrenchments, and so, from your experience at NAMIC, how important is it? How important is innovation for the long-term sustainability, especially as?
Thank you. So at NAMIC, which is the Nigeria Media Innovation Program of the MDIF, we've been working with a good number of organizations trying to innovate around the sustainability. And to do that, they've been working on different aspects of their business and different aspects of the way they communicate, write their stories, and build their audiences and communities. And to be honest, that's basically what innovation is in media, right? We gather information, we refine it, we process it, and we distribute it. And innovating around each one of those functions is just finding a way to do it better. So if I'm trying to reach an audience, how do I get there better? Where do I put my content? And how do I ensure that I'm reaching new audiences, expanding, doing good at the numbers games, but at the same time being aware enough to build a good niche and audience. And a good number of our participants have done pretty well in different kind of ways. Some have built communities around events, some have innovated using AI and using data. There was a demo earlier today by Data5, one of our participants, with a product that doesn't just serve his organization, but serves the ecosystem as well. So using tech to make data collection at the grassroots quite good. And so across the country, in Nigeria, and across the region, in Africa as a whole, we have to continue to push the boundaries of innovation, push the boundaries of the ideas, and not throw away things that have worked in the past, because we've seen people go back to printing. And because that sounds like doing something old, innovation is not necessarily invention. It doesn't mean you're inventing something new. It just means you're getting more efficient at achieving what you're trying to achieve. And that means you have to stay open-minded, rely on data, and explore new opportunities, build communities, and of course, tell very good stories. Thank you.
Thank you, Diju. So, Samaya, I'm coming to you next. And as he was saying, you were talking on that a key strategy for growth in African media is, reinventing or iterating or at pace and remaining relevant. In your experience, especially in the last, I guess we've known you for 9 years now, on this journey, what are some of the challenges and opportunities for innovation that you foresee in your future?
So I think the list is endless when it comes to challenges. Let me perhaps give a bit of context. So Mapi, Kakiso, and I are from broadcast, so I'm going to answer this question from a broadcasting perspective. I think one of the things that one of the challenges we are facing is what it means to be truly digital first, in the sense that it has implications for a number of processes. First and foremost, of course, being the production process, what it means in terms of day-to-day planning. Does it introduce extra layers? And tied to that, I think, is when we package all that digital content, is how that content is monetized. And I think it's something we don't often speak about. We might be moving in one direction in terms of how we are serving our ever-changing audiences, how we're serving them content, but we've got a sales team which is not cognizant of what is happening and how they also need to evolve in order to support the new direction which we need to take in order to remain sustainable. I think tied to that then is also, which we covered a lot in one of the sessions, is artificial intelligence. One can see it from a print perspective. They're very generic solutions that you can use that for. There's a very template that you can use to, for example, write a news story, but how does that play in terms of the broadcasting space? How does that, we saw, I think it was Alice, the AI newsreader. In fact, I was chuckling to myself thinking when I get back and my anchors are being particularly difficult, so I'll have Alice in the background, and say, okay, let's talk properly, right? But, what does that mean for a news channel like ourselves? What does it mean for resources? Just the other day, I went in to check on a production, and my editor was telling us that they have new software which essentially, for all intents and purposes, replaces them. And so he was asking me, is this it for him? So it's just looking at AI, how we use it to one, empower journalists to make our processes more efficient, and I think also just embracing the opportunities that will bring as a result.
Thank you. So, Petit Son, coming to you next. I caught the end of a question that you had, speaking about news deserts and, being steadfast in situations where people expect you to compromise. And especially now with, as he's mentioning, AI and new technologies and emerging technologies, forcing newsrooms to either keep up the pace and make changes. Earlier in some of the Ignite talks, they also talked about training and how that's important in continuing education. What do you think, given your experience? Probably you are the most famous broadcaster on the continent, I think, based on your experience. What types of skills, trainings do you think up-and-coming news heads, CEOs of newsrooms and journalists need to survive some of these, I wouldn't, for lack of a better word, shortcuts, to make sure that journalism still has the integrity that it's meant to have?
So I've got to respond to the most difficult question. I think for me, the starting point, particularly, let me start with the last part about the training of newsroom leadership and the training of journalists. I think one of the flaws that we find in our newsroom environments is the promotion of journalists from the field to editorship without training. These are journalists who are used to confront authority, and you bring them to leadership without training them on how to manage people. And what do? They terrorize journalists in the newsroom, because they're not trained in managing people, they're trained in confronting power. And I do think that that's the first thing that we have failed to do as newsrooms. We need to train editors on leadership, and not just leadership, but leading in a constantly evolving environment. And one of my observations is how journalism, I don't want to generalize, but this has been my observation, it's an insular discipline. We don't look at adjacent disciplines, and we don't look across at what other industries are doing. We are quite insular to the extent that we miss out on the tactics that are being applied by other industries to survive. So one of the problems that arise out of that, probably the media sector, particularly news media, is one sector where we sit like this and discuss strategies. You will never find anything like this in retail. You will not find this in any other sector except the news media. What does that do when we come up with strategies that fail when we have shared them? It's contagious to the industry. We all fail. So I do think that there's one area that we need to introspect and think about: how do we think in a competitive way while we collaborate, but not to the extent where one strategy that fails affects the entire industry like we do now. So where journalists are concerned, I think we have a new breed of journalists that are rock stars, and we are not dealing with that, because journalists are becoming the stories themselves. It's this me culture, and look at me, this is what I do, and this is who I am. And what has happened to journalists that actually advance the interests of the audiences they serve, and not themselves, because there's a lot of being self-interested in the way we do our work. So these are the things that we need to pay attention to in our newsrooms. I worry less about what is seen as a threat that's coming with AI technologies. For me, there's a dual effect that comes out of AI technologies, because one part they are substitutive, but the other part they are complementary. You cannot completely erode the need for human cognitive interventions in news productions, because artificial intelligence tools don't have reasoning capacity. You need that if you are going to have completeness in your stories. And the part about how we get to deal with elements that require us to compromise ourselves. Just a bit, I managed to get myself fired by the SABC, and in a dramatic way, and I achieved that spectacularly. So you get blamed by the ruling party for causing them to lose elections, and actually no, we're just telling the story of the country and how the citizens view their experiences of democracy in the period South Africa has been free from apartheid structured governance.
We are not telling the story about how great we are as African, because that is not the point. I wish a funder can come on and say, tell us what worked in your continent and amplify that. Because we as African, we need to consume news that reminds us that we are great, we are resilient, and we can navigate whatever challenges we are facing. Because right now, the whole idea of the narrative about our continent, from our own newsroom, is that there's no running water, is that there's no electricity, and that is not the sum total of who we are. So I wish funders can find stories that seek to affirm that words on the continent rather than to highlight that it doesn't work.
Is this the part where we talk to funders directly? Funders, I wish you could fund our live storytelling event, Story Saucer. It's a live journalism multimedia experience. That's the only way that I can describe it. We have videos up on YouTube that you can watch to get a sense of what it was like. We had it last year in July, 2 sold out shows, and we're looking for funding for season 2.
Okay, on funding, I think my approach is that I'm concerned about the fragmentation of the media as a result of the different interests of funders that we find in this space. I wish there could be more consolidation to the extent that you have the right number of media entities that are strong enough to provide diverse content, and not just this entity specializes in this and this and the other specializing in something else. I wish there could be more consolidation, and I do think that funders, if they were to approach it that way, I think we will be stronger as a sector than the fragmentation that we see now.
I think I'll echo what Mapi was saying. We are facing a situation where the newsrooms are very junior. And that starts also showing in the content that we're putting out there. And you're finding that editors are spending more time trying to make sure that the juniors are getting the story right. And that takes away from our ability to look at our products and see how we can make them better and reach more people and tell those stories. So I think from my side, it is a request for training, basically. Training not only just the junior, but also the senior. You mentioned training the senior journalists that eventually move into management roles. So really a need for training across the spectrum.
And Deji, the last word before everybody breaks out to their cocktails and dinner and the rest.
Yeah, I guess I'll be selfish and say front Namib. But basically what I'm saying is, and I'm piggybacking on what you said, is if we want newsrooms to tell the stories that matter and the stories that matter to us, they need to be independent, and to be independent, they need to be sustainable. So we need more technical support for the newsrooms, for the newsroom leadership, and these are the kind of special programs that we do at MDIF. And we're not the only ones. There are other programs like the ICFJ and other think tanks and hubs like this. So let's get more funding for technical support for organizations to actually do better in terms of the editorial, the audience, and the commercial as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Christine.
What do you know about the Sustainable Development Goals? yani kujisustain through this work imekuwa ikisaidia sana. So sustainable development goals are goals that all countries in the world that subscribe to the United Nations Charter, they came together walifanya 17 goals for the world to use in making sure watu na nchi or the world, the planet is prospering, is peaceful. What do you know about sustainable development? At the Africa Media Festival, centered around the sustainable development goals, how Kenya is making sure that is a reality by 2030, but also how it has partnered with the other member countries around East Africa to make sure it is just across the board. That is not all. We also have some amazing podcasts, live interviews, as well as some games, making sure everywhere, by the end of this festival, understands the sustainable development goals.
My name is Lily. Thank you, June, for that very kind introduction. We have a little trailer ready for you, so I'm not going to talk much. We're going to watch the trailer. I'll introduce the event and then our very esteemed and brilliant guests that we're going to hear from this evening. And as you begin to watch this trailer, please, on your phones, please find us on Instagram at Salam and Hello, and also on YouTube, and follow and subscribe. You have no idea how much it means to us, and we would so appreciate that. So with that, Sammy, cue the trailer.
We find so much joy in justice. There's humor in justice, right?
So glad to have you here.
Salam.
Salam and Hello is about our futures, our histories, and our todays.
If we're giving you a little bit of power, how are you going to use that?
Seek to be most truthful in what it is that you have to say about the world, and you will find that the world will show up truthfully for you.
About 150 people have spent sleepless nights for 5 months, and that's why I always say I cannot leave, but the whole team wins.
You make me think of things. You're great at this.
A place where we get to connect and grow together.
Representation matters, right? I think there's something deeply powerful about seeing someone who looks like you, who speaks like you, taking up a space in a powerful media outlet.
Talking about joy and justice.
So long as people can see that on their own or in their groups they can make a difference, they keep doing it.
When you hear the word refugee, what do you think of?
But I reminded myself that I'm going to be a part of a solution in the future and believing that.
One of the most powerful things we can teach our own children when they come home is that we also have a tradition, and that we also have a story, and that our ancestors also had a way of doing this.
We can be resourceful to ourselves, right? We can make these things self-sustaining. We can't keep expecting some donor in America to send us money.
How well have I taught your brothers to be feminist men?
I think I did a great job teaching my kids. Can I put this for myself?
Just hush.
I have 4 very grown children, or think they're grown.
Make them pay rent. That's one way. They'll very quickly realize they're not grown.
Because I had a question. This giddy feeling, this feeling when this person walks in, this guy when walks in, how is that a bad feeling? And I'm happy. And I made my peace then and then.
New episodes of Salam and Hello every single Tuesday.
I'm gonna put Rihanna and be like, never a failure, always a lesson. I mean, it's failures because you're just like, I shouldn't.
That's okay, girl.
I shouldn't have done that.
Don't miss it, and please subscribe, like, and share the podcast with everybody you know, especially them cousins.
Can I just date one normal person?
Over his 50 years, his contributions have so shaped Kenyan culture and art that in 2022, he was given one of Kenya's top honors, the Order of the Golden Warrior, in recognition of his outstanding contributions to arts and culture. Waliwo has played more than 40 characters on stage, including Romeo, Shylock in King Oedipus, and has acted in global films, The Constant Gardener, Shake Hands with the Devil, and The First Grader. On television, he memorably presented not only primetime news, but also The Summit and the Zain Africa Challenge. On the former, he is credited with being the only TV host to have had a one-on-one interview with former President Daniel Arap Moi. As a theater director, his interpretation of Kenyan musician Eric Wanaina's play Morfaya played to great acclaim at the New York Festival of Musical Theater in 2009. And Mwalimu himself is the author of 6 original published plays and has also written and published prose and poetry. For young readers, he has published Tom Mboya, Master of Mass Management, and a short story, Belonging, which was one of 14 stories featured in the collection Nairobi Noir and was later highlighted as one of the best mystery stories in 2021 by the Best Mystery Stories of the USA. Mwalimu John Sibi-Okumu is also a former member of the Governing Council of the Kenyan Cultural Center and the National Theatre, and is currently a non-executive board member of the Katiba Institute, which is dedicated so importantly to safeguarding the provisions of Kenya's constitution. Not a small feat, but certainly one that Mwalimu is up to. In 2012, he was given the honorific title of Chevalier in the Ordre des Bons Académiques for services to French culture as a teacher, which he was for over 2 decades. So please, Africa Media Festival, please join me in giving a warm welcome to John Sibi-Okumu. Mwalimu, karibu.
Thank you. I feel quite dead already.
Wow. Imagine how you'll feel at the end. Okay, so it is just a great honor to have you with us as somebody who we admire as a writer, a thinker, of many different hats that you've played over the many years. So let me start thinking about the role that you played in media for many decades. Media sets an agenda. We've been talking about that all day today. As a writer and a broadcaster yourself, you also, I'm sure, had agendas over the years for your work and your words. So tell me, what do you believe that the work of artists, what agendas does that disrupt within media and society?
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for being here. I think before we get into answering the difficult questions, I should explain how I became a media practitioner. I don't have any degrees, I don't have any formal training, but when I was a wee little boy, way back in 1961, I joined my father as a student in England of the law, and when we came back to Kenya, somebody came to the school I was at the time, and I recited a poem by Wordsworth called The Daffodils. I wandered lonely as a cloud, etc., etc., etc. And a gentleman who had been seconded by the BBC to teach African presenters in the wake of independence, called Robert Beaumont, who was with a lady called Roma Barraclough, said, this little boy speaks such nice English, which I'd learned in the 7 years in the UK. We ought to have him as part of what was then the Kenya School's broadcasting division of the Voice of Kenya, whose role in society was basically to teach people long before social media by just basically programming stuff on the radio where people could listen to the radio and learn English, mathematics at whatever time. So I remember that my first brief as child talent was to be part of a program to present Charles Dickens' Great Expectations. And it went on from there. When I got to university, I was roped in to read the news for what was then called the General Service of the Voice of Kenya. And we read news in English. And from then on, I was roped in. I was a French teacher full-time, 9 to 5, hence the mwalimu, the Kiswahili word for teacher. I actually taught for 30 years before I retired in great glory. But so that explains that I'm a bit of a phony here, because I have no credentials apart from watching people do what I do and imitating them. So sadly, that way of going about life has ceased. I don't think anybody can quite replicate my experience because you need degrees, you need masters, you need doctorates, and whatever it is that might follow. I think to answer the question about disrupting, I think the creative artist is a disruptor, a discomforter, in as much as we depart from the very basic premise that the world is imperfect. That's a trite observation. Any 2-year-old would say to you that the world is not right. It could be made better. So, without making too many claims, I would like to suggest that everybody in this room is potentially a disruptor. Everybody. So I take a certain umbrage to people who go around suddenly with a big badge saying, I'm an activist. I know there are lots around. I'm sorry, I don't want to give you a medal. I think we could all be activists in our own time. And the activist is basically the person who, remember yourselves as little children, who says, Mummy, Daddy, this is unfair. It's unfair. It's got to change. And that's what we do. We shouldn't make supreme claims for ourselves, and you also have to be given the opportunity to say things are unfair. Because if you say that things are unfair, power structures can come down very heavily upon you. So it's basically the struggle between the individual within society and the level to which we can go in expressing. So in trying to be a disruptor, Lily, it's just using the opportunity that has been given to one to push the envelope as far as one possibly can, without some sort of messianic great halo thing over one's head. The leaders that Africa has had in the time that they've had, it's a tough job running a country where maybe there are 210 different ethnic groups, people who define themselves differently. And the idea, again, the trite observation, it's all about the exercise of power and the keeping of power. So once you're in there and people are ranting and raving, everybody says it's a bit like school lunches. Nobody's quite happy with them. There's always something quite wrong. So there are people out there to get you. Now, what alliances do you have to make in order to remain in power? Should I make an alliance with you all the way from Ethiopia, or shall I bring in my cousin from my village? Who is more likely to poison my dinner? I think you. So I think I would then surround myself with a coterie of people like myself who are going to defend my point of view, and it might be necessary to put my enemies away, either in jail, sort of manacled and shackled, because I want to retain power. And then once you're at it for long enough, the urge to stay there grows ever more enticing, so that you come in with your revolutionary beret and your cap saying, I'm in for 2 terms, then I'm out, and 35 years later you're still in. But fellow Africans, sorry to be a bit sort of racial, we have to appreciate that Africa is changing slowly, and the disruption process is going to be a slow one. We cannot go from one thing to another and suddenly adopt the ethos of countries that have been nation states for the last 500 years when we're only 60. Beware.
That's quite a somber and heavy summary or reflection. So I want to visit again your interview with President Daniel Arap Moi, one of the only ones he gave one-to-one. You've also interviewed 4 other sitting heads of state, 4 other presidents. So I'm curious, given knowing the context in which you're entering those political conversations, given now the benefit of time and reflection, are there questions that you wish you would have asked some of these African leaders first? And then secondly, what questions must we demand of our political leadership now?
Well, let's go back to the present. The Kenyans here present will know that our current president, with a lot of flack and bad press, is the first president who actually sat down with a group of journalists for all of 3 hours and allowed them to field whatever questions they wanted. That's pretty much of a big deal, because when I was interviewing Daniel Arap Moi in 1997, I had 24 minutes. So that's progress. There's no other word for it. There's another question that you're going to perhaps ask me. Let's talk about the Daniel Arap Moi interview we're talking about storytellers. So what I said to you is that with every opportunity, I would just tell you some real life stories. So here we are, we've got a president, and I've started a program called The Summit, and we start off with people going up a lift into a building called The Summit in a hotel. And in the lead up to some elections, we've managed to persuade each and every player to be interviewed who aspires to the presidency. And the idea is that Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi is going to refuse. But then his minders, whom I knew quite simply because I was teaching their children. So I appealed to them and said, let's leave names out of this. Let's get this interview. So we have factions within government saying, no, let not the president go on to this program because this smarty pants might make a fool of him. There's another group of saying, Mr. President, if you don't go onto the program, you're going to be labeled as a wimp. So he listens to the non-wimpies and agrees to come onto the show. But there's a whole preamble, because whenever I did the show, one of the tenets was that my guests were never to have the questions in advance. It had to be me against them, and it had to be that I wasn't taking any sort of instructions from my producer as to what to say next. So I realized that I was in a pretty powerful position. Here I am. The president is not going to tell you when to have the interview, and his mind is rather disturbed by this notion that you're going to be able to ask the president anything. And they're not giving you a date, only that they've agreed in principle to give the interview. So there I am, more prone to a tipple 20 years ago than I am now. I've got some guys at home, and we're knocking back various forms of alcoholic beverage, and I'm basically pissed as a fart. And the phone call comes in at about 2 o'clock in the morning saying, "You're on." I said, "What?" And then I remember all the things that my mummy had taught me. In the presence of alcohol, drink lots of water. So to sort of douse 50,000 double whiskies, I put in extra zeros there. I'm drinking all this water, and my producer, whom I can name, Joel Musundi, says, we're going to State House. And Moi kept very, quote unquote, strange hours. So he was awake at sort of like 3 o'clock in the morning. So when we get there, he's actually having a chat before me by Ambassador Prudence Bushnell of the United States. So they all come out, and then he's surrounded by all these very tall people, unshaven like me. I had a glorious head of hair then, but all these other nutters don't have any hair at all. And I always had the preamble of saying, wouldn't it be nice for me to meet my interviewee? Just to sort of ice break and realize, as you all would if you got to know me better, what a splendid fellow I am. So here I am. I asked whether I can have a one-on-one with the great man. And the toadies and the acolytes are saying, no, not in a month of Sundays, you can't. So my guardian angel says, a woman says, please, he's harmless really, He's left his revolver at home. Let him have a chat with the president. So I go into this room, and Moy was a very commanding man. He's a tall man, made me look short. So he's well up there at 6 foot. And he's there with another gentleman who never left his side. And I say to him, Your Excellency, would it be proper for me to talk to you and ask you what I want? And he said, and I'm not going to put on some kind of accent or something to imitate him, I'm not Trevor Noah. He said to me, you can ask me what you like as long as you treat me as the head of state. He was extremely polite. I can only say what happened to me. So we go on to the set, and I'm saying, how can I get in the magical question? How can I get in the two? Remember, this is 1997, and an African head of state in Kenya has never given an interview such as this before. This is the first one, and everybody is on tenterhooks waiting. There's another short story and a memoir about what happened. My wife thinks I'm an absolute twit for being, this Kitwangumu who's going to do this again. Why don't you just stay at home and have another whiskey? So nobody's really for the event. And I had to get 2 questions in as a journalist, as a disruptor. I couldn't call him a dictator to his face. So I said, Your Excellency, Lily Bekele Piper.
I like it.
When you go to bed, people are calling you dictator around the place. When you go to bed, how do you feel about that? So I haven't called you a thief, I haven't called you a liar. I've said this horrible mob here is calling you a thief and a liar. What do you think? So that was the ploy. So we got that one in, and then I said very deferentially, Baba, you've been at it for the last however many years. When are you ever going to give up? And he said, oh, I'll give up when the people say it's time for me to give up. And then I said, okay, John, try to push the gears again. And they said, people in Kenya are calling you Moi Butu. How do you feel about being called Moi Butu? Sharp as a razor. He never missed a beat. If you look at that interview, he was with me all the way. So you know what I'm saying? These guys, these founding fathers, we've got to give them respect because they were working under very difficult circumstances to unite and create nations that didn't exist, basically. So that's my view. Maybe it's not the popular one. When I interviewed Comrade Robert Mugabe, again, a long story as to how we got to the interview, and we nailed him at the Serena Hotel in Mombasa when he was on honeymoon with wife number 2. So he'd come on a honeymoon, and people had given us a lot of hassle saying, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this. And the answer was no. So as he was exiting to go and open an oil refinery, I went and sort of threw myself at his feet, as one might do to Jesus Christ, and said, Your Excellency, I'm sorry, I'm just a measly little journalist, but we really would like to have an interview with you. And all his minions, whatever color Africans turn when they turn purple, because he said, that's fine.
I appreciate the fact that you have to take a certain approach in order to get the interview. But once you have it, once you have the audience, what is your responsibility to the woman who's not represented?
My responsibility was to ask this guy whether he's a dictator or not, which I did. My responsibility is to ask him when the hell he's going to leave power, which I did. But the disruption has to come with a modicum of restraint. Are we, as activists, gearing up to become martyrs? Am I going to choose you in the front row and say, you die for the greater good of the people of Kenya, and I'll come to your funeral and we'll create a WhatsApp group and I'll contribute 3,000 bob for you to have a decent burial? I don't think that's worth it. I don't think anybody's life is worth that kind of sacrifice. Personally, maybe I'm just a wimp too.
I mean, I think we each all, no, I think we all have our calling. I wouldn't call you a wimp, but I think there's some people who, without their sacrifice, some of whom you've written books about in Goya. You've written books about them.
The sacrifice, historically, they were overtaken by events. If you look at somebody like Patrice Lumumba, there he was, if you've seen the movie by whoever it is, very
and the books as well.
He was there minding his own business, not knowing that Mobutu had been paid by the CIA and everything else to get rid of. He didn't ask to get onto a plane and be thumped and beaten at the thing with all those pictures. Right. He didn't ask to be taken to wherever it was that he was taken. So the modicum of courage is that whenever I did what I did, I didn't have the vision to know what was going to happen next. You know what I'm saying? I'm not Ngugi wa Thiong'o or Henry Chakava, where people will meet me at my gate and chop my fingers off, which happened. You know what I'm saying? There is a certain courage, there is a certain bravery in daring to speak truth to power.
Absolutely. And I guess, thank you, yes. I think my point is, not in disagreement, but to push and say when we come to those moments of opportunity. Because it's a privilege. It's a privilege to have an audience with somebody of influence, with somebody of power. When we come to those opportunities, who must we bring to the table? Who must we bring into that conversation who would otherwise be unrepresented? So I'm thinking about in our Kenya, if we keep it just to Kenya,
yes,
the woman, the poor, the queer, the marginalized, the migrant. How do we represent them fairly and make sure that we are disrupting the world in order to give them a place? Is that your role? Is that my role?
Yes, it is. It is. I remember I thought about my syntax carefully. We're all activists. Let's not just have a few saints in the room. I think one of the things that we must recognize here in Africa is that we, by our very nature, represent a grouping of privilege. So, of Kenya's 55 million people, there are only maybe so many thousand who can come to the African Media Festival. So, when I go to the village, my village, and I go and see my aunties and uncles and everything else, they have no idea what AI is. They have no idea that some kind of robot's going to make their breakfast. You know what I'm saying? So, let's be real. There is such a thing, if you want to go back to the whole notion of, class struggle. There is a class struggle going on in Africa in our very midst. And I would challenge you that you all belong to the privileged elite. So don't get onto your high horse and say, with respect, that one of the ways in which to disrupt is to educate. You understand is to educate. You can, the program that I last did on Capital FM, it had the very sort of selfish title, John Sibi-Okumu on Wednesday. I made it up, every Wednesday we unpacked the Constitution. You know what I'm saying? We found somebody who could speak about health, and it was all very la-di-da, but the expectation is that the people who don't know might be led to know. And that is a very powerful instrument, again, to have, to educate. There are millions, tens of millions of Kenyans who don't know, good people, what you know. So don't have the arrogance to say you're in a little cocoon representing them, because they don't know. That's a disruptive state. If you walked into any bookshop, all the foreigners here, history of Kenya, history of the Kikuyu, history of the Taita, history of the whatever, because we have that trite observation that the past informs the present, and the present informs the future, and they're all linked. There is a huge gap, to my mind, to my subjective mind, in the archival function. We just have to sit down, ask those people who are in a position to know, ask our academics to know, what is it exactly? What was this geographic demarcation called Kenya? before 1963? Who were the people who were the players? And I play this game with taxi drivers and Uber drivers wherever I go. I was in Tanzania, in Zanzibar recently, and I asked my Uber driver, can you name any other Kenyan leader other than the current one? And the Uber driver said, well, who's the current one? You see the moral of that story. I really think with a passion, and that is why in my function as a playwright, which you mentioned, when I was in the States, I went to see in 1980 something a play called Fences, and it was written by an African American chap called August Wilson. And August Wilson also wrote Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, with the guy who was in the movie, that was his last movie, that he died. Anyway, when I saw Fences, it became clear to me that what August Wilson was doing in his Pittsburgh cycle was taking every decade of the African American experience and writing a play about it. So Fences. So my theatrical project was not that I was going to write a comedy, then a farce. I just took key moments in Kenya's history and told them and their significance through a story. So role play dealt with all the political assassinations. Kagere dealt with the great ideological debate between our first president and his sort of political nemesis, Bildad Kagere. Are we social democrats or are we going to be capitalist pigs? And we've decided to be capitalist pigs. But we have to go back to the moment when that happened, and you people, because every face that I see before me through this blurry thing is young. And I'm sorry to say again, it is the young who represent the future, and they have to know about the past. So the obligation is for us to supply it to them. So maybe somebody will be a YouTube channel that does nothing but go backwards before we go forward.
What are the engagements? What are the assignments? What is the material we need to have in our hands that we need to be engaging with in order to be active participants in our culture today?
Lily, I'm going to repeat myself in a different way. We have to know something about something.
What do we need to know? Other than, you've said the past, you've said history.
Well, the thing is, you know, remember as a mwalimu, at some point, whenever people say to me, what makes you a broadcaster, is that you've got to get really nerdy about what it is that you've decided to do and put energy into it. So if your bag is communication, surely you've got to read so that words and their construction roll off the tip of your tongue. You don't have to sort of spending out, what's the word for elephant? It's already there in your computer. You know what I'm saying? Somebody else might decide to do something else. But the sort of didactic, teacherly thing is get good at something. It's up to you to find out what it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? It would be a supreme arrogance for me to say, but I put in a lot of energy to make what I do look simple. I've not slept for 10 days in preparation for this interview, and I've been living on water alone.
I don't believe it. I don't know what to do. He's defeated me. He's defeated me. I'm defeated on my own podcast. Thank you so much, Mwalimu. I think what you've given us tonight is a slice of the many, many conversations, material, plays that he's given us over 5 decades. So if you don't yet know Mwalimu John Sibi-Okumu's work, please take some time today to engage with it. He has multiple conversations, as you mentioned, on Capital FM, book of plays, which we are actually going to give out tonight. There's multiple material, written material about his thoughts and his reflections on this country that he has seen grow and change over the last 50 years. And I think we would all be better as we engage with his words and his thinking. It has certainly stretched me and enriched me. So Thank you.
Thank you. Not easily intimidated.
Even by me, I can see tonight. You want to follow up?
It's one of my faults. But it is a quality that has to do with this idea of daring to disrupt. You know what I'm saying? If you're going to say I'm scared as a point of departure, then I think I've said this, do it anyway and see what happens. You know what I'm saying? I didn't set out to be, I just set out to do an interview. You know what I'm saying? I could sit on this platform and say something which I really think is critical about our current president. I could say something that I think, oh gosh, Ruto's got it all wrong. Now, there could be areas where he's got it all right. You know what I'm saying? But if I dare to mention one thing, I really, good people, have no idea of what's going to happen to me next. But the thing is, given the platform, you should have, courage, bravery is too much, you should have the sort of, some word meaning the nerve, I think is a better word. The nerve. You should have the nerve, given the opportunity, to say something. So if I look at all the people that I grew up with and really admired, I really admired Muhammad Ali as a little kid. I just thought, this guy's cool. Because there he was on all these programs. I really admired him for his intellectual pushback with ideas. I really, as a young kid, admired James Baldwin. I listened to that interview where he's sitting with some sort of conservative guy from somewhere. I go, oh, do you really think that the black man is ready for independence? And Baldwin is just so cool. And I said, gosh, I want to be like that.
There are microphones, I believe, Rahma, somewhere floating around. We have some prizes for those who ask questions.
What are the chances of a collective disruption of the African media in the African continent? Collective. And is it even possible to collectively disrupt the whole continent as a team, as we are here? And as I said, if you were to give us a theme for next year, a disruptive one, what would it be?
The terrible thing with Africans is that we refuse to unite. I don't know where you come from, but it's probably I have to go through Paris, Geneva, Frankfurt, before I end up in Yaoundé, Cameroon, before I end up in Brazil. We just do not know enough about each other. So, if I were to suggest a theme for Christine to adopt for next year, it has to be that we have to come together and know about each other. Another trick for the Uber drivers that I liked is I'm in Tanzania and I say, name one Kenyan singer. We're all there with Beyonce, Dr. Dre, Dr. Z, Dr. Pooh. We've got all these names at the tip of our fingertips, and I say to them, name one singer from Rwanda. Name one novelist from Burkina Faso. The answer is, I don't know. So, before Lily so graciously allowed me to come here, and I must thank her, because normally the likes of me are not given the podium to have this sort of thing. It's the first thing. It's the first time it's happened in my life. We're really shocked. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Where I am the center of attention. You know what I'm saying? Somebody's saying, "Oh, well done, laddie. Tell us what you did." It's the first time. Now that is significant in itself. It's significant in itself because we have to hear the voices of fellow disruptors and be in constant touch. I should be able to leave this, if I've made an impression on somebody in this room, they should come to me and say, please give me, what do people give these days? Not email address, your Zoom address? Something that will keep us connected. As a continent first, we've got to exclude the outside world.
Just a few thank yous, just quickly, just if I can take an opportunity to thank Baraza Media Lab for this opportunity and giving us a chance to partner with you, to the 2D production team and Summerbox for all the audio and lights, for our incredible interpreters who have been making sure that this content was accessible to as many people as possible. And I really want to shout out my producer Rahma Saif, who has worked triple time this month to make so many projects come to life, and she's a one-of-a-kind talent. So thank you, Rahma, all of your incredible hard work. And we invite you to continue to follow along every Tuesday. Tell your cousins at Salam. Salam with a E. Do not spell it S-A-L-A-M like you're wanting to do in this our Kenya. S-A-E-L-A-M. Salam is below. This is our 15th live show that we have produced over 85 episodes. Thank you. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and most of all, our greatest thanks is to each of you for coming here, showing up, being a part of the conversation, and disrupting media and society with us. Asante Nisani.
Oh, look how happy they are. Thank you both. Come down. And well done, class. You've done extremely well. You're welcome. Somebody said thanks, Mom. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'll take it. You have a cool mom who has cute legs. Let's go. Thank you both.
Wow. That has been amazing. I was glued all this time. I actually even forgot to go and pick my son in school. Story for another day. But I love Mwalimu John Sibi-Okumu because of his English. He has that English that would make, there's that English that will make your English run away. When you think you know how to explain, you have everything in order. Now when we meet, I'm going to say this and this. And then when you meet, you're like, what? So as you can see, yes. So that's some good job. Actually,
Mwalimu, earlier today, we recognized the fact that it was International Day of
Mother Tongue.
Hey, before you went to the UK, what is this your mother tongue?
Abamenabahai Sangare munokubano Esie Ndula Ebusia Eridala lyefu Sirimba Erudi Mlwange Nulwanda Chako Kulo Mala Manulu ya Nulu Murion. Mesdames et messieurs, je suis francophone, donc s'il y a des gens qui sont dans la salle qui parlent parfaitement français, je suis capable de vous parler à même.
Au jeu de rue.
Swahili.
Take it for granted.
The one thing I know now. Okay. So we're done with this part, and really thank you for being such an engaged live audience for Salam and Hello.
Thank you for coming. Thank you for buying your ticket. Thank you for trusting us with your time. Thank you for dedicating a whole 2 days of your life. I hope this was worth it for you. I hope you got the networks, the connections, the knowledge, the information. I hope this venue was way better than last year's. I hope that for those of you who came as first-timers, that this met your expectations and that you'll be back next year. I hope that we'll have more people come, especially for those who have never been to the African Media Festival. I hope that I will receive more and better pitches. I hope that we'll have a bigger and better festival next time. But for me, all I can say is thank you. This was your festival, like I said at the beginning yesterday morning, that it was a co-curated experience, that almost 90% of the sessions were pitches, right? I was working with the workshop facilitators. I was working with the Ignite Talk speakers to refine their own ideas. But the ideas really came from them. The demos came from them. The innovations came from the folks who presented here. And my last word is thank you.
Really cannot to say, I have nothing to say, then we go on for 2 hours. So I'm going to be very, very Kenyan in a sense. To echo Chris's words, most of the changes that you're seeing here today were because of your feedback. Most importantly, in terms of the format, the location, every single little feedback that we think does not matter. It does matter to us. And we would love to hear feedback from you about how this was. So we'll be following up with all those notes that you've seen about all sessions, with video recordings of all the sessions, with the graphic recording of all the sessions and podcasts about all these things that we've recorded here. So you have a year worth of content to consume and to engage with and to ask questions after that. I've had this a lot about, is there a next year? And that's the same question we had last year. Is there a next year? Should we just say wait and see? But I think as of now we have a next year. As of now we have a next year. So with that, for anyone who sees any opportunity for you to collaborate or work with us around this, please reach out to us. This year, as you've noticed, we've had a lot of pre and post events because we cannot fit everything in the 2 days. So we can collaborate and work on those kind of ideas. So reach out to us way early so that we can, have you in the program, have you participate in whatever form or format that you want, and let's see you next year. I think it's see you next year. It's a wrap. Go live and have fun.